Dear internet friends, welcome to subscriber storytime number 21. As I pin this letter to you, we approach 350,000 subscribers. And at the moment you're reading this, we may have surpassed that sum. Okay, done with the old lady voice. So firstly, if you didn't catch any of that, we just hit 350,000 subscribers, which is nuts. So thank you for being here, for receiving the cases that we put up respectively, fully. I just woke up. I'm sorry for being really up for anything that my crazy brain throws your way, for your patience, kindness, and for being, I can honestly say, the best community I know on this dark place we call the interwebs. So, yeah, thank yous are always in order when milestones like this are surpassed, because we wouldn't be here without all of you watching. If you don't care about cool fucking merch, 7 new designs, or a video podcast, you can go to this timestamp shown below. Hey, cool people, what's up? So I've been working on updating the merch store. It's been a long time coming. Had several designs in the works for a while. And they're finally here, and been working on getting that all set up, and doing the video podcast, which I'll get to. But now that new merch is currently live in the store, which is exciting, we have 7 new designs, including the next cameo design, which features our lovely mascot, the jackalope, and for the first time ever, merch for Nameless, which is awesome. You guys have been asking that for a while. And 25% of the proceeds for the Nameless shirt go to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So if you want to rep the channel and put your cash to a good cause, this is a good chance to do so. We also have the Dark Curiosity design for those who maybe want a more subtle way to express their interest in the darker side of life. We have a shirt that, honestly, I just wanted for myself because I constantly play the game of life and constantly feel like I'm trying to get my shit together. Yeah. Also, peep that new Dark Matters design, which I came up with the concept, and then Teespring just turned it into a masterpiece, because you should see my original sketch. It's bad. And my personal favorite, the derp shirt, featuring my wonderful little dog Petunia doing her signature derp. So, link for that is down in the description, and thanks in advance to all of you who support through merch. Now, another thing I want to mention is the video podcast has finally arrived. We've been on a I can't talk. We've been on a hiatus. We've come back with a bang, now in video format. The most recent episode, we took the Myers-Briggs personality test. So if you've ever been curious what you are, or heaven forbid, what my personality type is, peep that. I don't know why I keep saying peep that. Is that a thing? Did I get that off of a meme? Link also in the description. Plan is to upload every Wednesday, so subscribe over there to keep up to date with that. I think that's all I have to say. I've probably rambled long enough. Yeah. Oh wait, a different type of video coming soon. I've been throwing some ideas around, but I think I've settled on a place to start, but I'm babbling. So for now, let's get to the stories. We have 4 of them today, and I recommend you grab yourself a snack or a drink, sit back, turn down the lights, and enjoy. I was friends with a girl named Casa since preschool, even though we were very different. In high school, Casa was a tomboy, a little rough around the edges, and someone who enjoyed playing pranks and making people laugh. I was reserved, definitely more of a girly girl. However, we were proud of being opposites. Casa's grandparents owned a large amount of land, about a half-hour drive outside of town, where they built a farm. I'd been there a couple of times, but wasn't that familiar with it. One night, Casa convinced me to drive to the farm to pick up a few things she needed for a school project. I was reluctant. It was dark out, and I knew no one was at the farm that night. I didn't really want to be out in the middle of nowhere in the Florida wilderness, mainly because the bugs here are monstrous. Still, Casa was insistent, and I got tired of arguing with her. We drove out to the property, and at first, I told her I was going to wait in the car, but my curiosity got the best of me. We walked past the run-down farmhouse and to the large garage, where we came upon bales of hay and a four-wheeler. Casa said the farm was beautiful at night, that we should take a ride. I agreed to go, but was still nervous about riding through spider webs and being in the woods amongst wild animals. Then she said she wanted to show me something, and I couldn't say no. Now, Casa enjoys pranks, and her spooky tone led me to assume she was going to try and scare me, but I was determined not to fall for it. We took off on the four-wheeler, and despite my earlier misgivings, the weather was nice, and barreling through the darkness at top speed was fun. I'd almost forgotten about what she wanted to show me until we turned down a dirt road that narrowed, my arms brushing against the branches and moss. Casa turned the vehicle so the headlights pointed straight into the woods. She said, "Do you see it?" I peered around her. I saw trees and a strange shape on the ground. A skeletal-like scarecrow. Its mouth was agape, eyes wide, reflective like mirrors, and hair matted in clumps on its head. It looked like a Halloween decoration, and even though I knew it had to be fake, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. I remember saying over and over, "I see it, let's go." I'm a very logical person, and I told myself this had to be a prank. I also desperately wanted to get out of there. The sick feeling at the pit of my stomach overwhelmed my rationality. Finally, Casa turned the four-wheeler around. We headed back to the farm in silence for a moment. Then she spoke up. "Did you see the headstones?" I didn't know what she was talking about. I responded, unamused. "No, I saw the scarecrow." Cass's voice lowered, shaking when she spoke. "What scarecrow?" We accelerated, speeding back to the car. Now, I know Casa. She always owns up to her pranks. She loves the credit. But to this day, she tells me there was no scarecrow in the woods, that she didn't plant anything to scare me. I believe her. She rarely visited the farm, and there was no logical reason to have a scarecrow in the middle of the woods, or for Casa to prank me and not take the credit. I know that I didn't imagine it. We were parked there for a good 30 seconds while I stared into those rotted eye sockets. I don't know how she didn't see it. I never saw the headstones she was trying to show me. Later, she told me there was a cemetery in the middle of the property. In the South, there are a lot of old plantations and cemeteries, and she explained the farmland sat on an old plantation filled with a horrific history of slaves beaten by their masters for trying to escape. To this day, I know what I saw, even though I'm a skeptic concerning the paranormal, but I have no logical explanation for the scarecrow. I'm a music ed student at Ohio University. Bobcats, not the Buckeyes. It's a beautiful campus tucked near the Hocking River in Athens. It's one of the most haunted campuses in the United States, which means I have a few things to talk about. The most haunted part, or at least the most unsettling part, is Dirty South, the southernmost part of campus. Maybe it's the proximity to the Ridges, which used to be the Athens Lunatic Asylum. Not the name I would have picked, but it was the 19th century. Maybe it was the girls' basketball team that died in a bus accident and purportedly still haunts the place. Maybe it's just the lack of light fixtures, freezing winds off the river, and distance from everything else. Maybe it's a combination of everything, but it's horrifying at night. My friend, who we'll call H, often told me about his haunted dorm before class. At first, I didn't believe him, but one night changed all of that. On a very chilly Friday evening in early December, I couldn't sleep. My mind is constantly in motion, so I usually need a good walk to calm my nerves. I was out on my walk, and usually I go up to the student center, but it was freezing, so I decided to cut through Dirty South. At this point, I didn't have time for ghost stories, and while I believed my friend, I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. The saddest truth about campus is that if you're a guy, you're pretty safe, but this didn't stop me from being cautious. I was a little tense when I crossed paths with someone else. At this point in my college career, I was a member of the marching band, referred to at OU as the 110. It's a pretty tight-knit group of people. Even if we don't know names, we all at least recognize each other. One way we do this is the varsity band jacket that only members of 110 can wear. When I saw the familiar deep green of the jacket that night on my walk, I assumed the person wearing it would look familiar. He didn't. He wore only the band jacket, jeans, and a t-shirt. I wore a giant puffy jacket layered with a thick hoodie and snow boots, and I was having trouble not shivering. He must have been freezing. I called over to him. "Hey you! You in the 110? I expected an answer, something along the lines of, "No, just borrowing it for the night," because I'd never seen him before. He was about 6 feet tall, with the typical short hair and clean shave that the 110 required, glasses with frames akin to those of the 1980s, and a noticeable limp. He didn't respond, only looked at me with wide eyes, seeming like he wanted to say something, but he remained silent. Then he ran off, and I did too, in the opposite direction. The whole thing doesn't sound too creepy, but when it's 1:30 in the morning on a Friday night and you've listened to your friend talk about ghosts all day, it was a little unnerving. I didn't fall asleep until 6 in the morning. No one in the 110 has died on the Dirty South part of campus. 2 members died while in the band, but pictures of them exist, and this guy didn't look like either of them. Maybe he stole the jacket and got scared. But why would he be scared of me, a dumb kid who's all of 5'7" and 140 pounds with snow boots on? I have no idea. This guy outsized me and was pretty stocky. I'm not entirely scared that I saw him. I'm more scared that I saw him start running for his life. I've always been fascinated with the odd and paranormal, so I'm the person my friends want to take to investigate those things in local areas. Most expeditions turn out to be nothing, an abandoned place with strange graffiti or pipes and settling houses, except for one incident. My friend Max asked me to go to a really haunted place with him, and knowing Max, I figured there was danger involved. We got into his Jeep, and he drove us out to the middle of nowhere. Once there, he informed me it was a mile trek through the woods to get to this place, as he'd found it while horseback riding. We walked to a trailhead by the side of the road, which was strange in and of itself. On the ground was a piece of guttering wrapped into an anarchy symbol next to the trailhead, as if warning about the chaos that lay ahead. After about a quarter of a mile along, we came to a 4-foot deep gully, a small stream trickling through it. We crossed over, and on the other side, off to the left, was a small, grassy field surrounded by trees. In the middle was a rock, and I could see an old Native American man sitting on top of the rock, looking very casual. I'm a skeptic, but for some reason, I could tell he wasn't real, or more to the point, alive. I asked Max if there was a burial ground around there. In a casual, almost sarcastic tone, he said the locals thought there might be, since people found all kinds of arrowheads and trinkets nearby. Another quarter mile later, we crossed another 4-foot deep gully with a creek flowing through. This is where things started to get weird. Here, the trees bent in weird directions, seemed stunted and warped, with no straight limbs, all twisted and gnarled. The path broke into 3, all a few feet apart, separated by trees, but ending in the same place. We moved up this hill, and at the top was a fallow field, and at the other end was a wall from an old building that had long since fallen. Max told me about the dark feeling people reported having here in this spot. I looked at the sky, estimating from the sun that it was about 2 in the afternoon. Taking a deep breath to clear my mind, I said to Max, "I don't feel anything." But I spoke too soon. All of a sudden, a dark, oppressive feeling passed over me. Ghost stories don't scare me, but this felt different. A genuinely evil feeling. In the sky, the sun was suddenly on the horizon. Something in my animal brain told me, regardless that it had just been 2 in the afternoon, something weird was happening. Night was upon us, and we didn't want to be here when things got dark. Max and I took off running, down the hill and to the split path. We both took the center, single file. And somehow in the space of 30 feet on a narrow path, we managed to get turned around and were now running back up the hill. I cursed and we tried again, taking a different path this time, and once again, we got turned around. This happened one more time before we each took separate paths and started towards the right direction. We stumbled down the gully and splashed across the stream. On the other side, I stopped, breath heaving from sprinting. "It can't cross running water," I said to Max, sure of the lore on things like this. Evil spirits can't cross running water. But then I turned and looked back at the stream, only to be met with a thick wall of fog moving very slowly across the water. It didn't move like regular mist, though, and appeared as though it was trapped behind a sheet of glass that drifted closer to our embankment. We kept running, entering the glade with the rock in the center, the old man sitting atop of it still. Max was ahead of me, but in desperation, I stopped near the man, took out a cigarette, broke it open, and sprinkled the contents on the ground. I looked at him and said, "I'm sorry if we disturbed you, or your sleep, or offended you, but there is something really evil following us, and if you could please protect us, or slow it down." He seemed really pleased as he stood and stretched. As I took off after Max, I got the feeling he'd been waiting a long time for someone to ask. After catching up to Max, we slid down the next hill and back to the road. Once inside the car, we just sat there for a few minutes, not saying anything. Then Max turned to me and said, "What the hell did you do? I've never gotten out of there with so little resistance. In fact, no one else I know has had that little resistance." A few weeks later, Max told me he was going back out there. I had a bad feeling, and I told him not to take his gun that he always carries, a .45 long Colt. He asked me why, and I don't know how, but I had a clear image in my head. There were going to be other people out there, and if he took the gun, he'd get shot. He didn't take it with him. The next day, he told me there were people out there. Their approach scared him so badly, his first reaction was to reach for his gun for protection, but instead he was forced to hide. As it turns out, they were hunters carrying shotguns. Addendum: the city built a park there. I keep checking to see if anything strange has been reported, but I'm kind of afraid to really know. First, I would like to apologize if my English is bad. I am originally from Uruguay, a country in South America between Brazil and Argentina. When I lived there in my childhood, I had several creepy experiences, but after this particular incident, nothing really creeps me out anymore. Around 7 or 8 years old, My family and I lived in a very bad neighborhood in the capital city. My stepfather grew up there though, so we felt at least a little safe there. At the time, in my country, no matter where you lived, horrible things could happen to you, from organ stealing to murder over the stupidest things. Sometimes at night, people ran down the streets crying or shouting. It was just a normal part of the evening noise. It is part of the culture in this area to believe in the paranormal. There are many different religions, both good and bad, that people use to their advantage. The Western world might call some of these religious people witches. My Auntie Eve was one of those people. She was a white witch, someone who uses their knowledge only for good. So you can imagine black witches were the evil ones in our eyes, referring to their intent though, not skin color. I know this story is a lot of information, but that's because it's the truth, and the truth is complicated. So this all began when a family member died. My great aunt, not my Auntie Eve. My great aunt was from my father's side, who were all rich but corrupt. My mother's side was middle class. I was younger than probably 5 years old. According to my sister, Mary, she was a very nice lady who sat in a wheelchair, rich but honest and loving. To me, however, that wasn't the case. Both my great aunt and my sister were similarly horrible to me. My aunt treated me as though I was a servant instead of family, to the point where sometimes I wasn't allowed to eat dinner with the two of them. Mary treated me much the same. She'd learned from my aunt after all, and they seemed to have a special type of connection over their meanness. Which is why, when my great aunt died, she left her money to Mary, leaving nothing for me or the rest of the family. However, because Mary was underage, my aunt's family was able to clear out the bank accounts before my sister ever saw a penny of it. My great aunt must have been furious from beyond the grave, as her spirit visited Mary every night, a bright, ghostly image staring at her from the end of her bed. At first, she never spoke, but this went on for weeks, and Mary revealed that our great aunt was urging my sister to join her on the other side, to spare her a life of poverty, though we were far from poor, and so they would never have to be apart from one another. At night, I would watch Mary fall into a strange trance where she would spin around and around, arms spread wide, head hanging limply like her neck was broken. She called it a dance and even taught me how to do it. But sometimes Mary made weird noises, spinning faster and faster until she fell to the ground, or my mother stopped her. I thought it was just a game at first. Then my Auntie Eve, the White Witch, heard of Mary's strange behavior. She knew it was not the actions of an attention-seeking child, but something more sinister. As a White Witch, she told my mother what to do, and she agreed to a series of rituals that would free my sister from the bond between her and our great aunt's spirit, and place her under the protection of the goddess Yemansha, the goddess of the sea, as she is called by the witches. Mom and Mary were both baptized into the religion for the ritual to work, but Yemansha's help would serve as a blessing and a curse. I don't remember all of the rituals, but I will try to reconstruct the process for you as best as I remember. First, over the course of 6 months or so, my mother acquired certain items: a coconut, chalk, sweets, children's toys, and live chickens. Then our house had to be cleansed of lingering evil spirits who were drawn by the paranormal happenings. To do this, my Auntie Eve covered the coconut with chalk markings and lit incense while we said prayers over it. Then she handed it to us, telling us to kick it all around the house as if playing soccer with it. She sang the whole time, and we had to remain silent during the process. Then Aunt Eve smashed the coconut open on the ground at the bottom of our street where two roads crossed. Even though many in our country are Catholic, the people of Uruguay know not to touch such offerings to the gods and know the negative consequences that follow. Then, at some point down the line, our whole family had to go to a specific beach during a specific time. However, I wasn't allowed to go with them and had to stay in the car, as I wasn't being baptized. I remember leaving without even getting to glimpse the beach myself. Then we made an offering of sweets and toys to the spirit children who were trapped between worlds and often loitered in parks and playgrounds, not even knowing they were no longer a part of the living. The offerings were given at midnight to ask permission for the baptisms. I remember I wasn't allowed to eat any of the sweets. The last ritual which I was present at was an offering to the gods. This included cutting the chicken's head off and taking their organs out. The organs were then fried and everything else was offered to a goddess. The smell was something that, even years later, I still can't forget. Auntie Eve's intent was to draw upon the goddess to help sever the connection between Mary and our great-aunt's spirit and allow her body to be possessed by the goddess for a short period of time. While Yaman Shah possessed my aunt, she and Mary interacted. Mary later told me the goddess drank and smoked, was delighted by the offerings, and sang and danced for several hours. Then, when the goddess departed, it left my aunt exhausted. My sister was never visited by the spirit again. It had worked, but at a close call. Mary had to have different colored candles throughout her life that were lit during sickness and important life events. And when lighting these candles, she had to pray to Yaman Shah. You see, Yaman Shah loves her children so much that whenever they get too close to her, she sometimes takes them with her to keep for an eternity. As the goddess of the sea, her children are most vulnerable while traveling over water. However, my sister has stayed far away from the ocean since. And now we live in the middle of Europe where the seashores are many, many miles away. But there are some nights I wonder how close she was to being taken instead of being saved. Special thanks to the Patreon family, who are now more vital to this channel's survival than I can say. Due to the recent demonetization to almost every new Dark Matters or Nameless that has come out. The names you see on screen are just some of the lovely people who financially contribute to this channel, whether they are passionate about subscriber story times and true crime cases, or the other dark content on this channel, can't talk. Their support cannot be overstated. If you are interested in supporting the channel, info's in the description as usual, but even if you only continue to support by watching, I appreciate you and I thank you. I wouldn't be here without you either. Just want to make that clear. And of course, a special thanks to the subscribers who chose to share their stories with us today. We have Catherine, Ben, Cindy, and Lily. Good job, guys. If you've ever had a personal terrifying encounter that you've had, it can be paranormal or not, please feel free to send it to subscriberstorytime@gmail.com and your experience might end up in the next subscriber storytime. If you wish to stay anonymous, please mention that in your email, and I will tell you right now, putting in the effort and editing and grammar and all of that really helps us make our decisions. Thank you for watching the video, and most of all, for continuing to support the channel. And don't forget to check out that new merch, though, and the podcast. Stay safe, friends, and have a good night. I'll see you this coming week.